Hi everyone, this is Mackenzie, and I'm going to be presenting about the barriers and facilitators to couple therapy for low-income couples. So before I started, I want to talk a little bit about why this topic is important to me, and it's mainly because I've worked in the Division of Children, Youth, and Families and in community mental health, where I've seen a lot of the vulnerabilities and negative outcomes that kind of create a cycle for families and couples and individuals of low income. So I wanted to address that treatment gap in this presentation, a little bit at least. And so just right from my article, I have a little bit of research. So basically, low-income couples are at greater risk for poor relationship outcomes, and lower-income couples are also less likely to seek relationship help than middle-income couples. And divorce and relationship distress and fighting can have poor outcomes for a family. And when couples divorce, they'd be even more subject to more severe forms of poverty if they are from low income, especially poor child outcomes. So all around, I think it's important to just kind of see where couple therapists can increase the accessibility that low-income couples have to couple therapy. So the two research articles I'm going to be talking about today are the first one, which has the goals of identifying barriers and mitigating factors for these barriers for relationship help seeking. And that's the primary article I'm going to be discussing. And then towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to discuss an article that provides a possible solution for some of these barriers and try to eliminate some of them. So the first article that I'm discussing is a very recent study, and they sampled 231 newlywed couples. They were sampled from a high poverty neighborhood, which was Harris County, Texas, and the neighborhoods had at least 30% of the households living in poverty. The newlywed couples were also in their first 12 months of marriage. The median household income for these couples was $32,500 a year. And the article didn't say what the low, medium, and high income thresholds were for the researchers, but 32,000's relatively low. And 65% of the couples had children, and which I kind of figured out myself that means some of them had to have had children before they were married, just to put it out there, because these couples were in the first year of their marriage, but the average age of the kids were 3. So, and then the study was also a longitudinal study. It took place over an 18-month period. So couples were interviewed at baseline when they were first sampled into the study. They're interviewed 9 months later, and then they're interviewed another 9 months later. And the measures used by the researchers at each measurement, at each 9-month interval, were the couples were asked if they ever received premarital education, such as relationship classes, if they had ever considered attending couple therapy, if they had ever attended couple therapy, if they had friends or family who ever attended couple therapy. And for those who had considered couple therapy but had not actually attended, they were asked what barriers had kept them from seeking couple therapy. Okay. So the 3 categories of barriers that were addressed in the study were first attitudinal barriers, which are basically thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about therapy or other areas in the range that keep someone from going to therapy. And one example is that therapy doesn't work. Another one is individual therapy would be more helpful, or friends or family would be more helpful than therapy, couple therapy. And the second barrier addressed in the study were structural barriers. Those are outside factors, outside of the thoughts, basically. So that can be income, which is the focus of this, whether or not they had access to childcare while they're in couple therapy, or maybe they couldn't get work off, something like that. And the third category of barriers were relational barriers, and that is where one partner has an attitudinal barrier. So believing, or the reality being that one partner does not want to attend therapy and one partner does, something like that. So the results of this research in addressing what the most common barriers are presented on this table here, and I highlighted a lot of writing, so I tried to highlight the ones that were most prominently measured among the couples. So the most common attitudinal barrier was that people thought individual counseling would be more beneficial than couple therapy, especially husbands. You can see the 27% versus 15%. So more husbands thought that individual counseling would be more helpful. Maybe they thought that their wives needed individual therapy, not couple therapy, or they thought that about themselves. Husbands also thought, you can see the next line down, I didn't highlight that, but husbands also thought friends would be more helpful than a therapist. So now on to structural barriers. The first most prominent was not knowing where to get help or who to see. So that was the most common for wives. And that's pretty similar to the number of those who also could not afford or reported to not be able to afford couple therapy as a barrier. And the top barriers overall were structural barriers. And the article did mention that insurance companies often do not reimburse for couple or family interventions that are not focused on treatment of a mental health diagnosis. So for those of you who will be billing insurance companies as a couple therapist, that's something to consider when trying to decrease this barrier. But I'm not sure how many interventions are specifically aimed at treating a mental health diagnosis. I know we talked about it a little bit. So lastly, the relational barrier. The results showed that 36% of wives believed that their husbands did not want to go to therapy. Whether that was just their opinion or if that was reality, that was a significant barrier as well. So now I'm going to discuss the facilitators that were addressed in the study. So these are things that make it more likely that a couple will go to therapy. So first is personal experience, which was just a cover name for premarital education, which is basically a relationship education course. Excuse me. So 6% of the couples reported that they had experienced premarital education, and that did make the couples more likely to go to couple therapy later on. And if you're not sure what premarital education is, most often it's what couples who are getting married in a church have to attend. A lot of it is religiously based or in a church of some sort. So, and the second facilitator addressed in the study was social network experience. So that was knowing of friends or family who had attended therapy. The article did not say, did not report the statistical results for how many couples did know someone, but it did say that it was a facilitator. And so knowing of friends or family who had attended couple therapy did make a couple more likely to go as well. So overall, the results, they are both facilitators, and yeah. So now I'm going to talk about some potential solutions and ways to eliminate some of these barriers or maybe enhance some of the facilitators. The article suggested targeting the barriers and the facilitators and taking advantage of online alternatives is one way to do that. There are online couple therapy programs that couples can partake in, and I'm not sure if they are free, if they are just a cheaper price, and I'm not sure about their effectiveness, but it's definitely something for couples of low income to be aware of if going to therapy in person is difficult. And then I found an article, which is the supporting article that I'm going to discuss, about a workshop. So this is basically group couples therapy where couples can go to a all-day workshop and learn couple therapy interventions and ways to enhance their relationship. And the one that I am going to talk about is called Safe Conversations. So the goals of Safe Conversations is to strengthen the couple relationship in order to mitigate the negative effects of poverty on family health, children's academic performance, and community health. In the article, the Safe Conversations workshop was provided to diverse and low-income couples in a major city. And then they followed up with the couples using the dyadic adjustment scale. So they were given that before the workshop and then after. So the Safe Conversations uses, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but imago relationship therapy, which IRT utilizes psychoeducational processes to educate couples on the unconscious purpose of marriage, teaches a dialogue process for deepening conversations, and utilizes those deep conversations to increase empathy between partners. IRT also teaches couples the importance of increasing caring behaviors, decreasing negative interaction, and having fun as a way of re-romanticizing their relationship. So I took that right from the article. And so that model, that IRT model, is applied to this workshop. So it's definitely a different environment for a couple to receive couple therapy interventions in a 1 day or few hour long workshop instead of over multiple sessions over multiple weeks that combines into many, many hours. But the results did show immediate effects right after couples finished the workshop. They reported feeling better about their relationship and changes already. And they also showed effects 1 year later, specifically regarding marital satisfaction and conflict management. And another thing that was important was that there were no gender differences. So both genders showed equal benefits from the Safe Conversations workshop. So as a final word, I want to talk a little bit about the critiques that I personally noticed in the articles I looked at. So first, in the first article about barriers and facilitators, there was very little diversity. There were no same-sex, excuse me, there were no same-sex or racially diverse couples in that study, but there was specifically a lot of racial diversity in the Safe Conversations workshop study. Another critique in that first article about barriers and facilitators is that it sampled couples in their first year of marriage and it ends at 18 months of marriage. So I'd be curious to see how the results changed for couples after they'd been married together, say, for 5 years. But at the same time, addressing these things in the first year, addressing the barriers and eliminating the barriers early on is important. So like we learned in residency, some couples wait 6 years of being in distress before seeking therapy. So kind of addressing what the barriers are first off and eliminating them as soon as possible is really important. So I'm also interested in seeing what the outcomes of in-person therapy versus online workshops are. So especially between incomes. There's definitely more research needed to address that, but my thought was for any income, if an online workshop is equally, an online program or an in-person workshop is more effective than a long-term in-person therapy, why wouldn't you just do the online or the workshop option? And as therapists, that's something we definitely want to consider because we wouldn't want to lose, I don't want to say lose business, but lose clients because there's now just as effective program that's online or that's in groups. And that might affect the future of this career, or what, instead of doing individual couple therapy, you might end up doing more group therapy depending on which is more effective and for which income you're interested in working with. So finally, I did want to just address, because this is important to me, what would you all do with hopes of becoming maybe a marriage or family therapist? What would you do to increase the accessibility to couple therapy for low-income couples? We could also answer that when you have to comment. But just to think, like I said, how do you feel about working in a private practice and billing insurances where low-income couples may have difficulty seeking treatment? And would you offer workshops? Would you offer an online or develop an online program? And how do you think it might impact your profits and your clientele if more research shows that other options are more effective? And how could you boost the accessibility of couple therapy for low-income couples overall? So that is all I have. And those are my references. And thank you all for listening. And I look forward to seeing all of your responses.